Thank you everyone for joining us for our Edmentum Solutions for Allied Health webinar. My name is Leslie Holland. I'm the National Higher Ed Consultant for Edmentum. I've been with the organization for over 9 years, and prior to that I was an adult educator and trainer. So I've been working with this solution for quite a long time, but it has evolved significantly, and we want to make sure that all of you that are joining us today have an opportunity to explore and learn more about our solutions specific to allied health. If you haven't been on a GoToWebinar before, a couple quick things. The first is that there should be a pop-up screen that allows you to kind of control and hide the control panel. So you want to click on that little arrow, it'll hide it so it's not obstructing your view. Click on the arrow again, it'll open it up, and then you can use the questions area. Because we have a larger group today, we're going to take advantage of the questions area versus chat. So you should see a section that has a little plus sign and the word questions. Click on that, it'll expand it, and then you can type in a question. If you hide your control panel, then you won't see the questions area. So what you have to do if you have a question or you want to provide feedback, click the arrow again and open it back up. So hopefully you'll be able to navigate that without any concerns, but if needed, please raise your hand and I'll kind of circle back to this particular screen. So if you haven't heard of Edmentum before, don't worry, it's a little bit newer name in the marketplace, but our solutions have been around for quite a long time, and you probably have more familiar possibly with PLATO courseware or with North Star workforce readiness. But we're going to start out today a little bit around the legacy of innovation, because as we work with adult students at many different levels, it's really important that we pay attention to their needs. And that was one of the reasons I really was so invested with this organization, as well as really has such a passion working with the adult audience, is that our solution is not just, out of the box, you have to use it the same way every time, but as flexible and unique as the learners that you're working with. So whether it be more of a mastery-based approach, prescriptive instruction, the fact that the content is appropriate for adult students, and also really integrating all of those different skills at all different levels is really critical, and we definitely want to support learners regardless of where they are. Now, when we look at the solutions that Edmentum provides for the allied health student, it doesn't mean that it begins when they actually are in a certification program, but it could sit well before when they're interested in going into a particular track or into a specific career area cluster, but they're not necessarily sure yet what certification they have. So as we look at the solutions today, we're going to look at sort of 3 themed areas. The topics and solutions that fit for foundational skills and helping with those entrance tests, such as the TEAS or the HESI or Accucess, depending on your program. What things would help fuel career area literacy and fluency in that pathway, which means what are some resources that would assist students in improving their vocabulary so when they start getting into coursework, that it's not such a burden to break apart words or acquire that new vocabulary maybe in a more technical context. And then ultimately that last step of preparing for a specific certification test. How do I review for it? What is some of the question styles that I'm going to see? And of course the content knowledge. So as we move from left to right, so foundational skills, what things could help us there. The second stage as that career area literacy, being very familiar and aware of the content that you will be expected to know as you get into some of your certification courses, and then ultimately this certification test preparation overall. So I want to stop here for just a moment and get us associated with the questions area. So of these 3, and you can say all 3 or first, second, third, fourth, however you want to combine them, which of these 3 is of most interest for you today? So in the questions area, I want you to type, you can type 1, 2, or 3, a combination of those that is of most interest for you today. So the questions area, if you missed that part, is in your control panel. So you have to expand the control panel by clicking the little arrow, pop it back open, and then click on the questions area. And then that'll let you type in exactly the questions that you have. So I'm going to give everybody a moment to do that. I'm going to expand it so I can see what everybody is typing. Okay. So again, if you want to do 1, 2, and 3, all of the above, number 2, whatever combination, that's absolutely fine. I just want to make sure that everybody is pretty comfortable responding. Good, okay. Great. Well, thank you everyone for participating in that. I'm going to try to have several opportunities for you to provide feedback. As we go through the presentation, do not hesitate to type something into questions. If I can't answer it during the scope of our presentation, I can circle back with you afterward because you've registered. I'll have your contact information. All right, so we see a mix here. Obviously, students need to have at least step 1 before they can go on to step 2, and then of course step 2 before step 3, but depends on when you're going to intervene with those individuals. So I want to talk about some of the different product pieces by name so that we can associate them with different components of the life cycle. Okay, and if there's questions as I'm explaining that, then we can circle back as well. So the first piece that I want to highlight here is what solutions would be helpful for us to talk about when we're looking at those that need help with the foundational skills. So that's when we're going to talk a lot about the adaptive intervention solution and also the post-secondary academic library. We want to get students up to snuff, right, at the math level, at the reading level, at the writing level, and also likely in science as well, that they need to be able to function in those courses, be successful, right, process that information. So these two solutions are targeting those foundational skills either through a diagnostic assessment, which is what you're seeing over here on the right, and we'll look at a couple examples of that, very holistic, what in general is needed. Or we can start to get a bit more specific, for example, things like your TEAS or your HESI or your general Accucess preparation or other academic targets as part of the courseware library. Okay, so either a holistic take, what do I need, how do I get up to the level I need, or do I want to be more aligned to a specific assessment such as like the HESI or TEAS or Accucess. So those two elements will be for that first foundational component, right, as we talked about, step number 1. The second piece, when we start to think about that career area literacy, is when we start exploring in the career library. Now these courses, and we'll look at a couple examples, are really allowing the student to get comfortable not only with how let's say a health sciences student would navigate that field, but also what types of jobs are present there, what type of vocabulary they need to be comfortable with, and also sort of what's that day-to-day experience of a allied health science employee, what does that look like, regardless of what particular certification path that they're pursuing. And then ultimately, the last stage where we say about that refinement for the certifications is going to come through the North Star piece here, where students are going to start to see content aligned to specific certification tests, as well as questions and practice opportunities around that. So as a student working with these solutions, we do not have to all start at the same place. You may have some students who begin with the resources for foundational support, those that may be beginning at the same time in some of the career pathway components, and also some that are working on the certification preparation. So there is no wrong way to begin that process. It all depends on how intensive the support that that individual learner needs, and several of you provided some different answers to what that looks like, right? How much help do those individuals need to get started in the program? So I just want you to think as we go throughout the day, presentation today, is exactly what intensity level do they need? And then I'm going to try to circle back with this to say, well, these are the types of solutions that you may want to think. So is this a learner or group of learners that we're working with that need lots of help? They need something very scaffolded, very structured from A to Z. Hey, this is how I get up to level. That is a little bit more selective, right? More of a moderate approach, that they need a little bit more coach support. I like to think of it that way, that they need some review, but maybe not as profound as some. Mild, right? They're close to the level. So especially when we get to sort of the the bridge between moderate and mild, that we're starting to look at that career pathways, the career area literacy, because they're closer to being getting those certification classes or completing them, and then of course the certification kind of is sitting preparation sitting over here. Okay. Any questions so far? Does that make sense? Any points of clarification that I can make for anyone today so far? Okay, and hopefully everybody remembers how to do their questions area. Okay, so let's talk about the more holistic, big picture type of look is going to come from our diagnostic assessment, which we call Accucess. So just in a nutshell, just to give you a quick overview, this assessment is looking for where the student is currently functioning in terms of their grade level equivalency. So the numbers you're seeing at the bottom are examples of grade level equivalency. It does go all the way up through the end of 12th grade and as low as first grade in math, second grade in language arts, and third grade in reading. In terms of the remediation range, again, for all of those through 12th grade. That does not mean that this is intended for a 6th grader, a 5th grader, a 4th grader. This is intended for a young adult and adult student who needs some significant help. So one of the biggest concerns I hear coming out of allied health programs that we work with is that there's a significant deficit in math skills. Anybody seeing that as a challenge point in their programs? Below grade level functioning in math? I see lots of yeses. However, we don't want them to be insulted by the fact that they have to go back and review fractions, percents, ratios, right? All those dosage and calculation prerequisites. So Accucess is one way of tackling that. So I want you to think about the math as well as reading comprehension. So I'm just using math as an example, but this is also available for reading and language arts, so grammar, mechanics, and such. So same approach, we need to target what is missing and how do we get them up to that desired grade level. So essentially this is a diagnostic test that is adaptive. So as I'm going through the test, the questions are getting harder. If I'm getting things correct, if I'm getting things incorrect, it's getting easier, right? It's looking for where I am right now and creating a reasonable plan for what I need to work on to get up to level. And there is absolutely no reason that I cannot reuse this assessment if I needed to. If I wanted to say, well, let's get everybody up to here, and then we're going to get the next group and kind of get them up to the next layer, so you can have them in chunked out into 2 or 3 groupings. However you want to tackle it, as individualized or as comprehensive as you want. So for example, if I had a learner, and I'm going to hop over into the program so I can show you an example of this, is if I logged in as a student to the program and I took a test such as the Accucess, and your screen is going to change in just a moment. And I should have an example of both subject areas. So I do have math up presently, but let me know. Hopefully your screen will catch up now. So I just logged in as a student, and Jessica has several different assignments. I have a math one, and I will also show you a prescription for a reading comprehension as well. But this is what Accucess looks like for a student. Okay, this is underway. By the way, this is not a test that they have to do all in one sitting. It's something they can pause and come back to as they are comfortable. Maybe they didn't have enough time, or they, you know, just it wasn't a good testing day. This is a test that you can use as you have the time. So I'm just going to begin the test so you can see an example of what a student would encounter when they begin an Accucess diagnostic. Again, you choose the parameters of the assessment, so it can be as big a range or as narrow a focus as you want, and as students go through. So they are going to get about 30 questions. They are going to choose their answer, and they are going to choose next. They are not told if they got it correct or incorrect. You can find that out at the end as an instructor or facilitator if you want to investigate some more, but they are really assessing how the learner is doing with the algorithm, so they can say, well, they've gotten 2 of these wrong in a row, we're going to adjust this way. So that's all happening behind the scenes depending on how the student is responding to the questions. If I ran out of time, I can save and exit and come back. It will not give me the same question I had before. And if you have a group of 20, 30, 100 students who are taking this, they're all getting a different set of questions, right? Because it's all based on the algorithm, how they're responding, what things they're getting right or wrong, and then of course a pretty substantial test bank. Okay. So a question that was asked is, is this test timed? It is keeping track of how long they spend. However, it is not a limited time. The same reason I explained before about saving and exit. This is an informal assessment for you to help get an action plan together for students who may have more significant needs. Before I leave the test and we look at an example of a remediation plan for this test, any questions before I leave this area? Okay. And again, if you think of it later, it's okay, we'll circle back. Okay, so pretend that we finished this assessment and we want to go on to our learning path that is recommended. So I'm going to hop down with my student here, and she has now whatever learning path is recommended for her. So whereas we saw earlier a layer of, first, second, third, it said 200, 300, 400, 500, the student is only going to see levels, okay? So inside of each level, they are going to have the objectives for the college and career readiness standards. That's how this test is designed. So you will see them kind of more thematically grouped for each level, and in each level there is a pretest. Can anyone further guess why there would be a pretest at the beginning of each sublevel? So I just did a big test, an overall 30-question comprehensive test, but why would we have a pretest at each sublevel? Anybody got a guess? So if anybody's worked with adult learners, it's kind of like trying to figure out where the holes are in Swiss cheese. Kind of depends on the student. The holes may be really deep, they may be very shallow, there may be lots of different complicated hole network. And we never want a student to sit on material that they already know. So there's multiple opportunities for an individual to show that they know that material at several opportunities. So Accucess is looking very holistically. Can they answer this question? Do they understand this material? But sometimes I'll finish that test and be like, oh yeah, that's what that was asking me. And now I have it assigned, and why should I have to go do it from A to Z? So within the solution, they have several different layers to expedite their completion. The first is that they can take advantage of a pretest in the subtopic groups, so they could flag things, okay, I've got this and this and this, but not this one. So this is totally there for the learner to help refine that section. If they don't feel that they have that strong prior knowledge, they can also go directly into specific concept areas. So for example, if I needed to, let's say adding mixed numbers was the place where I had the most difficulty, and I begin my tutorial, which is the instructional component here, and I start working on that tutorial, and there's lots of different strategies about how I may complete that, right? I may go through section by section, and this does have audio support. It has additional tools and resources for students, again, depending on the level of the material. But to kind of follow the idea of, I'm going through this and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember how this works. That makes sense. And I really feel comfortable with that material. There is no reason that a student has to go through all of the content of that tutorial, right? They feel really comfortable. So they can leave that tutorial behind. It'll save where they were working, and they are able to go directly to the assessment that's tied to that activity. So the one we were working on was that adding mixed numbers. So a student says, oh yeah, I remember how that works. They can go directly to the mastery test that's tied to it. Their goal is 80% or better. They go directly to that. If they can achieve it, then they go on to the next thing. If they cannot achieve it, then that test is going to lock and prevent them from trying it again immediately. And that's the same design you have throughout PLATO, whether we're talking about the career courses, whether we're talking about the foundational content. So at any point, if this is something that they cannot meet that expectation, the test locks, they go back to the tutorial, and they have to finish it up before they can try the test again. Okay, so it's not just test for test's sake. Okay. All right, so just as a quick look, this was the result of taking that foundational diagnostic. They get a remediation plan, and I just want to quickly pull up an example of a reading comprehension one while we're in this area. So just as I'm doing that, think of any questions that you may have at this point before we're going to proceed after this into some of the career area literacy type of topics. Okay, so I'm just going to pull up in just a moment a reading comprehension one. So think of any questions that you have. And you should see in just a moment, same kind of setup for a reading Accucess. Okay, so same kind of structure depending on the range, right? Exactly what is needed. Same whether it be instruction as well as assessments. Okay. So it all depends, and it's really up to you what you would like for them to complete, but this is going to give them exposure to vocabulary acquisition, reading and interpreting informational text. This is something I think really key for a lot of individuals, right? Chronological and logical order. So this is just a quick taste, just want to give you a sense of how similar in that structure. So they will have aspects of both. You can assign one or the other subjects. Okay, so far we've talked about students who are needing a very intensive level of support, right? Those that are at this first stage. And I do also want to show you a little bit about like the HESI and TEAS students as well as we get into some of the career area literacy courses. So I'm going to move into that area, but I want to kind of give you a sense of comparison with the assessment-driven approach like we have with Accucess compared to a course. So Accucess we talked about, right, with that continuum, with that diagnostic overview. When we look at a course, for example, with the TEAS or HESI or Accuplacer, or those that are for the career area clusters, they're going to have a different design. And these pieces are going to equally help with that prior knowledge. So instead of having a overview as you start out with the Accucess, here you would have pre-tests, post-tests available, mastery tests, which are at the topic level. We already saw some examples of that. And then you also could have at the end of multiple units also a end of semester or end of course test. So you have several intervals of opportunity for exemptive assessment, such as through the pre-test, comparative assessments. You can also do with pre and post tests, and then at the topic level. So if you want to have all these, you're welcome to. You don't have to have all of them, but those are all ones that you could bring into the mix. All right, so let's take an example with some of the career area courses. Does anybody use the TEAS or the HESI in their program? Okay. Yes. Okay. Well, fabulous. So we are working on an update with the TEAS. We know that that has had a new update, so that is forthcoming very shortly. Also have material around the HESI, and then generally, in all of your core content areas, such as, your sciences and your math, all the way up through the calculus level and physics. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to log back into the program, but this time as an instructor administrator. That gives us a little bit more flexibility to pop around into different aspects of the courses. So I'm just going to start out with just a couple examples. So we talked about T's, and again, I acknowledge that this is something that we're going to have a newer version for the newest alignment of the test, but just to kind of give you an example, is that these courses are going to have that superstructure of units. So whether I'm looking at the TEAS course or the HESI or the Accuplacer, or if you're in Texas, the TSI test, they're all going to have that superstructure of a pre-test that is exemptive, that post-test. But these modules that we're looking at here are all coming from the same library that we talked about with the diagnostic, but here we're looking at a course that's aligned to this particular goal. Okay. You can use this course in its entirety, like, hey, you're going to go A to Z and we need to go through all of that content. You also have the opportunity to modify those courses. So, for example, you wanted a mix of a couple smaller elements, or you wanted to align it with a specific goal. Let's say in this case, you're having a review course. So there's definitely an opportunity to make this very much your own, and so that the alignment is, of course, matching, is this in alignment to a particular course you're offering, or a review program, a boot camp, a student support service, however that may be. Comparatively, when we look at a course for the career and technical education area, and I will pull up a list here for you of what ones that may fit the bill for you. This is part of a greater 80 course collection, but I pulled out specifically those that are targeted for health science. But if you have students who do a blend of maybe business information systems or things like that, they're also business-oriented courses or accounting-oriented courses as well. So I'm just going to pull out a couple of examples here, but these also mesh with things like the TEAS course, like the HESI course, like the Accuplacer learning paths that are created. So what these courses are introducing is what, as I mentioned before, that career area literacy. So for example, I want to start getting students comfortable with what the body systems are. They're maybe not yet in the medical terminology class, but that class is very challenging. So we want to make sure students have maybe a bit more fluency and exposure to these concepts, where you want to make sure that they're in the right certification pathway for their interest. So for example, what I'm pulling up here is an example of the tutorial for one of the career courses in the allied health area, as we already described. And again, that's going to structure with that tutorial where the student is moving at their own pace, has audio support, has videos and examples as part of that tutorial, and could expand on something that you're offering already. It could be a resource for students who may struggle with some of the material, or a prerequisite of some of those concepts that they are going to encounter later on. Okay, so it could really help with some of that vocabulary. And one of the pieces I really love within this solution is, if you see there's a little folder here, it has a glossary of all of the medical terminology terms used in this whole semester course. So this is something a student could print and draw from if they would like to. So these courses, like the academic-oriented courses, have the same flexibility as all of the courses in the library, that they provide the opportunity for full customization, which means that you can take whatever elements that you want and like within any of the content courses and put them together in a blend that meets your needs. Again, whether it be for a review, whether it's for a certain individual student, it's to help enhance a course that you're offering, expand some of the things you're doing in distance education. So there's all sorts of different ways that this could meet those needs. And all you have to do is kind of pick out the elements that you're looking for. So perhaps you want to use a little bit of general career explorations module. So we want to take maybe this unit And I know that I want to add into that unit maybe something from the Health Science Unit 1, and I want to put specialization, so I can include that, and I want body structure, I mean, whatever formula that you want, and as many different units that you want to cobble together as makes sense to your needs, whether they're just from the career collection, they could be from the sciences materials, they could be, I mean, wherever you want to put it together. These are all resources that you can use to make what's going on over here that end product that is most opportune to your students. So whereas we talked earlier about the foundational level, this is that more intermediate need, right? Starting to really expand their career area fluency, maybe some review of some academic principles, but also maybe giving them some inspiration and creating some excitement about some of the career area pieces, but also working on the literacy at the same time. Okay. So we can make sure you have a list of all of those things that are available, but I just want to emphasize that they are very easily mixed and matched and merged together in whatever shape or form that you would like, and then what the student would see would be a whatever unique collection you make. And one other thing I would just bring up, if I mix and match and merge anything over here on the right-hand side, those pre-tests and post-tests are also changing to the changes that I make within the unit. So, for example, I had a program who loved doing custom courses to help scale prerequisites for some of their more advanced science courses. So what they did is they looked at what were the common areas, and it was especially in chemistry and more advanced math, that students typically struggled with year over year in those courses. And so what they did is they pulled together those materials, right, and all those specific activities, and they didn't do it 80 times, they did it once and they shared it with everyone, because that's something that you can also do, is this becomes part of your course library. And they ended up with a very informative pretest about what their students needed, or what the strengths and needs of those students were, so that they could more adequately respond to the needs of the class. So they were able to kind of screen everyone to say everybody's really having problems with periodic trends. Everybody got that one wrong. The same way as we talked about Accucess kind of giving us a sense of what that individual needs, here we have an opportunity to maybe get a strengths and needs of the cohort. So that's one way that they started to really use the courses, is to get a better picture about what were the commonalities of the class and how in turn I can help support the needs of the learners. All right. Any questions about customization? All right, so I have a question for you then. What are some of the types of information about students who are working in a solution such as what we've looked at so far, such as the courses or the assessments? What kinds of information would you want to be able to find out about them? How long they've been in the program, maybe, how they compare to other students who are taking the same assessment. What kinds of things would be important for you to be able to find out about their activity in the program? First one I always get is, have they been on lately? Are they doing what I may guide them to do or to complete? So absolutely, that was the first question I saw, was, are they on? Are they doing what I want them to do? So actually, as an instructor, your dashboard tells you exactly that, right? These students haven't been on lately. So I can filter by those students. Or these students have recently completed a module for a particular class. So for example, with the courses, I could see, exactly what students have been working on. So there's a way to really filter quickly and easily exactly what's happening. If I need to find out more information, I can click on the student individually and be able to also see exactly what it is that they're working on. So let's go back to our student here, Jessica, and I can see exactly the activities that she has been working on most recently. Remember, we did that mixed numbers activity. I can see her time on task, when she worked on this compared to this. So there's a lot of transparency. So if you ask them to do it, that accountability is absolutely there for you if you want to enforce it. All right, so we've touched a little bit on each of the stages except for that last really critical review stage, right? So let me go back to our 3 parts, and I saw everybody gave me feedback initially, right? Which of the parts? So the last piece here is that certification, test preparation, and review. Right? The most critical linchpin in the whole piece is I've got this done, but I'm really getting stuck here. I need a lot of review. So just as a question to the group, what review tool do you guys presently use? Do you presently use software, a book, or a combination of both? Use a software, book, or a combination of both. If you could use the questions area to provide that feedback, that would be great. So I see a few votes for software, a couple votes for books, and a couple votes for both. So as students are using solutions, right, different resources provide different feedback. And the North Star Workforce Readiness Platform is really designed to provide that coached resource that's providing guidance as they go through the instruction, but also can give you additional means to provide assessments or review as a group. So I'm going to pick an example here. Let's go, our most popular one that students tend to use this for is for Surge Tech. And you may or may not have that in your program presently. But just to kind of give you a point of comparison, is the North Star Systems lessons are a brief review, so they're expecting that a student had exposure to these concepts before, but may need a quick review of the concept, maybe some examples or vocabulary that's presented. Okay, so those would be available next to each of the topics. And then each of the program areas have a collection or bank of questions. So this one, for example, has 45 questions in the test bank for this particular area. The goal is that a student would do at least 10 of them in order to get a fair judgment of their proficiency. So at least 70% or better in those questions. However, beyond the traditional review question style, you can also do it in game mode, make it printable, or even use it with a whole class as a review. And this is actually very popular for a lot of programs to do as well. All right, so let's just look really quickly at practice mode. Practice mode is going to provide a student with questions like what they would see on the official assessment. Again, this is going to keep track of the time. However, it is not a time-limited experience. They get to have multiple attempts at an item. However, they only get points if they get it correct on the first try. So their score, which is what you're seeing up here on the top right, will only improve if they're able to get it correct on the first attempt. Every question also provides an explanation as to what was the correct answer. So again, as they're going through, they do have the opportunity to review as they go along. And the program also keeps track of what questions that they have missed. Okay. So if I had done a good share of the questions, and you can see it's also keeping track of my performance, both this particular session as well as all of the previous sessions that I've worked on this, I will also be able to revisit questions that I may have struggled with, or to kind of review those same concepts. So in understanding surgeries, I've done 4 of those previously, and I currently have a 25%. If I click on the items, I can actually see the different dates that I worked on those particular activities, and I can also see the questions that I missed. So it provides me with a resource to revisit the concepts that I may have struggled with, as well as an opportunity to maybe do some additional studying. Any questions on what we've talked about so far? Anything around the North Star solution? Great question. So is this something that students do independently, or can this be part of a class? Both. If I was a student and I got registered for this solution, I could go and navigate and go wherever I wanted and review at my own, on my own choice. I can also, as an instructor, and this is something we recommend as a best practice, can also have a course structure. And as part of that course structure, I can make assignments of specific elements of that content. And that helps me hold the students accountable to completion of different components of the course, whether they logged in, how many items they did, how their score was overall. And it also gives me resources to do what we call as a assessment checkpoint, build the test. And these allow us to give students simulated assessment, right? But unlike the practice mode, it's not giving me multiple attempts or additional guidance. So this is a way to have a quiz in the same area as I would also have practice mode. Okay. So North Star gives you that flexibility for review. It can be very much integrated within a course if you want to, aligned and blended, much as we were discussing before. But all of these solutions really give you that dexterity to make this solution comprehensive to meet the needs of your students at all of these different levels. So just as a recap of what we've talked about so far, is these solutions bring to the table opportunities to help with students at a prerequisite level, right? To supplement what you're doing, or to blend and enhance what you're doing. They can be done all at the same time. It may depend on the particular program that you're offering, right? A distance learning versus a blended class versus a traditional classroom approach. And all of the solutions that we provide also have tied to them professional development about how best to do that. Because again, there isn't just one way to accomplish those goals. What we really find critical is that you have the flexibility to support students at many different stages of and levels of need as they go through the products and solutions. So my last question to you is, of any of the solutions that we looked at today, right? So we looked at the assessment-driven component, we looked at a course-driven component, and we looked at a review-driven component. Or any of those things sound like something would be useful or helpful for your students? And then, of course, any additional questions that you may have. I see a couple feedback with all of the above. It really depends on the student audience. Yep. Great. And I always remind that, depending on where your students come into the pathway, right, how significant their needs are, that they may need all of the above. You may have them start, as some of you have mentioned, right, they're kind of halfway between this. They need a little bit of this, but mostly this. So always have this opportunity to be as flexible and unique as the audience that you're serving. And the biggest thing I also kind of circle back with is at all of these levels, you have resources to help support individual students who English is their second language, right? Read aloud, opportunities for translation in many of the different lessons and assessments. So there's other resources here as well to help support students who English isn't their first language, but that they really want to get into these career pathways. So I appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you would like a copy of the recording, please let me know in the questions area and I will be able to see that that's something of interest. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us and your participation today, and have a great rest of your week.